Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we will talk about an extremely important and painful topic about love that never happened. Or I would put it this way, the story of a broken relationship from the call in 2019 to the confrontation in 2026 and how it affected Ukraine. There is one simple truth that for some reason diplomats and politicians tend to forget. The one who asks is not equal to the one who is being asked. This is not humiliation, it is reality. When you come to someone for help, for money, for weapons, for protection, you are not in an equal position. And to behave as if you are equal when you are the one asking is not pride, it's foolishness. There is another truth, a truth that people like to repeat in business and diplomacy, nothing personal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's nonsense. Everything is personal. Every handshake, every glance, every word at the negotiating table is personal. When you insult someone publicly and then tell them, well, it's just politics, nothing personal, you're fooling yourself. Because the person you insulted remembers, and it will cost you, always. No exceptions. Today I will tell you a story that proves exactly this. The story of the relationship between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. This is a love story that never happened but could have changed a lot. Think about it. If Zelensky had realized that Trump values loyalty, straightforwardness, and honesty above all else, Ukraine could have had a friend in America, not just an ally, but a true protector. Trump is a man who rewards those who are with him. He likes to win together. If Zelensky had become his ally instead of his problem, Ukraine's history could have taken a completely different path. But that didn't happen. Instead of love, there was war, not with Russia, but with America. Diplomatic, personal, but destructive. And it wasn't Zelensky who paid for this war, it was Ukraine. Today I want to lay out the full chronology, facts, quotes, turning points, so that you understand not only what happened, but also why. Why does Trump feel the way he does about Zelensky, and how did it affect Ukraine? I'll say right away, I'm not going to defend or attack Zelensky. I want to lay out the facts and let you decide for yourself. But I will give my analysis along the way, because that's what you come here for. The phone call that started it all. The story begins on June 25th, 2019. Zelensky had just become the president of Ukraine. A comedian, a TV star, a man who played the president on television and then became one. Trump called to congratulate him. It was supposed to be routine, but it turned out to be anything but. During the conversation, Trump asked Zelensky to look into Joe Biden and his son Hunter, who was on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company. Here are Trump's exact words. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the investigation, and many people want to find out about it. So anything you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Well, Zelensky said, of course. And it meant, I will do it, I promise. Trump also asked to look into the CrowdStrike server. The servers are those of the Democratic Party, which Trump for some reason believed were located in Ukraine. He asked Zelensky to work with Rudy Giuliani, his personal lawyer. Zelensky said, of course, absolutely. So what did Zelensky do by saying, of course, absolutely? He was polite on the call. He said that his new prosecutor would look into the situation, and then nothing. No public statement, no investigation, no cooperation with Giuliani, no documents. Trump was stunned. He'd never experienced this before. Later, Zelensky publicly stated, I don't want to interfere in the U.S. elections. Well, it sounds reasonable at first glance, but no, nobody asked you to interfere in anything. He was asked to hand over documents that already exist. Not to lie, not to deceive, not to falsify. Just, you have the documents, please hand them over to us. From Trump's point of view, it was a betrayal. Trump believed he had legitimate grounds to be concerned about the Biden's corruption in Ukraine, And the new Ukrainian president, the very one Trump was supposed to help, refused to cooperate. Is that so? Even worse, that phone call became the basis for Trump's first impeachment. The Democrats used it to accuse Trump of abuse of power, that he pressured a foreign leader to investigate a political rival. Trump was impeached by the House of Representatives in December 2019. Now, put yourself in Trump's place. You are asking for a favor.
Человек говорит «да» по телефону.
And he does nothing. And then your phone call, your conversation leaks, and you get impeached. Trump often says Zelensky could have solved his problem with a single phone call, but he decided to interfere in America's political life. Zelensky, decided to interfere on Biden's side, on the side of the Democratic Party, in our political life. And Trump never forgot this deception. Stop saying that Ukraine is corrupt. Let's move to February 2020. Trump had just been acquitted by the Senate. Zelensky gave his first major TV interview after the impeachment to Christiane Amanpour on CNN at the Munich Security Conference. Trump repeatedly called Ukraine the third most corrupt country in the world, which matched the statistics. But in the interview, Zelensky looked into the camera and said, "Please stop saying," he addressed Trump, "that Ukraine is a corrupt country, because from this moment on it is not." From what moment? From when he was elected or from the moment of the interview? Not only was it a lie, he also directly corrected the President of the United States in public, saying, "Trump doesn't understand anything about Ukraine, but CNN did this on a channel that Trump considers his enemy, and they consider Trump their enemy." Zelensky was also right. Well, of course he was lying. Or maybe he was fighting corruption, but we didn't notice that during his years in power. But actually, we noticed quite the opposite, but we'll talk about that later. The leader of a country that depends on American affairs tells Trump that he's wrong on CNN for the whole world to see. That was the second blow. But remember this phrase from Zelensky, "From this moment on, that's not true." Well, the corruption of the country, that's not true, because we'll come back to it later when we talk about corruption. He played Biden like a fiddle. When Biden took office in January 2021, Zelensky found the perfect partner. Biden was ideologically and financially committed to Ukraine, and then came Russia's full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, which Biden, to put it mildly, did not prevent. Well, in my terminology, that means he helped. And suddenly Zelensky became a hero of the Western world. In green military t-shirts, unshaven, unyielding. "I need ammunition, not a ride." Zelensky became a symbol. And by the way, he showed pride, heroism. And America opened its wallet. Over the next 3 years, the United States sent about, in my opinion, $175 billion in aid to Ukraine. How much exactly, of course, I don't know. Trump says it's twice as much. How much of that money was stolen? Again, by the way, maybe we sent 350 and they only received 175. That could also be the case. It seems that both Ukrainians and Democrats were stealing. They shared it, with Biden himself, for example. Trump was watching this from the sidelines. He was getting angrier and angrier. His position, which he expressed repeatedly, was that Zelensky was playing Biden like a fiddle. Every time Zelensky came to Washington, he left with about $10 billion, and Trump saw zero accountability, zero return for America. During this same period, Zelensky took actions that later gave Trump a powerful weapon. In February 2021, he shut down 3 opposition TV channels, 112 News One and ZIK, I think it was called. Yes, citing national security. In 2022, after the invasion, he merged all Ukrainian TV channels into a single state-run telemarathon and just tried to do anything outside of it. He banned opposition political parties, and the presidential elections, which were supposed to take place in 2024, were postponed under martial law, supposedly in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine. That's likely how it's written there, right? But you see, the European Union criticized all these measures. International press freedom organizations condemned them, and later Trump used all this to call Zelensky a dictator without elections, which for the most part was true. And here it's important to understand the contradiction. Zelensky was asking America for hundreds of millions of dollars to defend democracy from the usurper, the tyrant, and other threats from Russia. At the same time, he was shutting down opposition media, banning parties, and canceling elections. Even if this is justified by war, it undermines the whole argument. You can't ask for money for democracy while destroying it at the same time. Campaigning for Kamala. Now we're coming to what is probably the most devastating moment in the relationship between Trump and Zelensky after the original phone call. And this is the moment that turned not only Trump personally against Zelensky, but also the entire Republican establishment. In September 2024, just a few weeks before the U.S. presidential election, Zelensky came to America. He visited the Scranton Army Ammunition Plant, a factory in Pennsylvania, Biden's hometown, in a critically important swing state. The visit was organized by the Ukrainian ambassador, Oksana Markarova. Present were Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro and Democratic Senator Bob Casey, and then Zelensky went to Washington, where he met with Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party's presidential candidate. Kamala Harris used the meeting to contrast herself with Trump, telling reporters that she would not bow to dictators like that guy over there, the orange one with messy hair. The optics were devastating. A foreign leader visits a swing state, meets with the Democratic candidate at a military plant using taxpayer resources. Republicans saw this as a foreign leader actively campaigning for Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party against the Republican Party. 9 Republican congressmen demanded an investigation. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson wrote directly to Zelensky, demanding the dismissal of Ambassador Markarova. But the real damage was done by the interview with The New Yorker. Around the same time, Zelensky gave an interview to The New Yorker magazine where he called J.D. Vance too radical. This was right before the elections, and he said that Trump actually doesn't know how to stop the war, even if he thinks he does. Zelensky did everything to make Trump hate him. That's it. I don't even know what more could have been done. Zelensky added, "Let Mr. Vance number." Let Mr. Vance read the history of World War II, when the country was forced to give up part of its territory to one specific person. He directly compared Trump's peace plan to the Munich Agreement with Hitler. He even lectured him. Trump, of course, exploded. He said that Zelensky was making nasty little jabs. And he noted, "But with Putin I got along very well." Think about it from Trump's perspective. Imagine you're asking someone for money, a lot of money, for your family's survival, and then you go campaign for his enemy, insult his partner, and compare him to Hitler. What would you expect? That's exactly what Zelensky did. What Ukrainians called Trump. And now let's talk about something that few people say out loud. What Ukrainian public figures, bloggers, journalists, and politicians actually said about the president of the country that is their biggest benefactor, a country that sent them more than $175 billion. These are real quotes from real people. At the beginning of 2025, a story went massively viral with enthusiasm. It was spread by Ukrainian media, bloggers, and social media accounts that Donald Trump was recruited by the KGB in 1987 under the codename Krasnov. The claim came from a certain Alnur Musav, the former head of Kazakhstan's security service. He claimed to have connections in the KGB. Kyiv Post. One of the most well-known English-language Ukrainian publications came out with the headline, "Trump has been recruited." He is a Moscow agent. This is what the former head of KGB espionage says. Then followed, the Kremlin and Kazakhstan have compromising material on Trump. That's all. That's all. Proven 100%. The story has been viewed more than 10 million times on social media. Ukrainian bloggers and commentators played the most active role in spreading it. The message was clear. The president is a Russian spy. The man on whom the survival of our country depends is a secret agent of the Kremlin. Well, fact-checkers from Euronews, France 24 Snopes, and others checked and found absolutely no evidence to support this claim. The chronology of Musayev's career didn't even match. In 1987, he was working at the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the USSR, not the KGB. So there was no way he could have been recruiting spies. But by that time, the damage had already been done. The story spread, and Trump's team, meaning Ukraine, took note. And here's what specific Ukrainian public figures said, according to Kyiv Post's own selection of the top 5 reactions to Trump from Ukrainian social media. Vasyl Baidak, a Ukrainian comedian, wrote publicly, "Russian military Trump, go to hell," and so on, right? He changed the famous phrase of the Ukrainian warship, directing it, so to speak, at the American president. And Irina Cherniguz, a Ukrainian poet, military blogger, and I think a service member, stated that after Trump's meeting with Putin, this handshake means that military invasions of sovereign states and the slow genocide of peoples are now permitted and no longer require justice. In other words, to put it briefly, she accused the President of the United States of legitimizing genocide. Alexander Volodarsky, a Ukrainian blogger and commentator, wrote, "Trump's behavior can be explained very simply.
Dementia.
Dementia that has affected an already not-so-great mind. So not only is there dementia, but even before that, the mind wasn't great. This is the person on whom everything in Ukraine depends." Ilya Ponomarenko, a Ukrainian journalist and one of the most popular Ukrainian English-speaking commentators, completely dismissed Trump, saying that he would have found a reason to take offense regardless of Zelensky's actions. Kyiv Post reported that in 2025 became a turning point in Ukrainians' attitude toward the U.S. Ukrainian social media, TV commentators, and bloggers began openly calling Trump a puppet of Putin, a Kremlin agent with the codename Krasnov, an enemy of Ukraine, mentally ill, a traitor to the free world, and an accomplice to genocide. I want to say that Kyiv Post is wrong. I've seen all of this, well, starting probably from 2023 for sure. So it didn't start in 2025, but in 2023. Let me remind you, these are people whose country received more American money than probably any other nation on earth. They call the leader of this country a Russian spy, and a traitor. And at the same time, these same people say, only America can help us. The U.S. is our only hope. Please, we beg you, don't abandon Ukraine. Don't you think they're schizophrenic? Well, all of them, or almost all. This isn't politics, it's a failure of basic common sense. You can't insult someone you're asking for help. You can't call someone a Russian spy while asking them to protect you from Russia. You're asking to be protected from Russia, and you're calling the person you're asking for help a Russian spy. Don't you think that's a little strange? And Zelensky himself wasn't far behind. On Ukrainian TV, he said that Trump unfortunately lives in a space of disinformation. He called the President of the United States of America a victim of Russian propaganda. He didn't say this at home, drunk in the kitchen while smoking, but on national television. Andriy Yermak, the head of Zelensky's office, was described by Politico as an irritant whose behavior could be harmful. It could jeopardize aid to Ukraine. Politico is not right-wing at all, a left-leaning publication. In private conversations with allies of the Trump administration, Yermak accused certain Trump officials of having direct ties to and working for Russia. Well, for example, Steve Witkoff, Trump's special representative for the Middle East. Trump, to put it mildly, was furious when he was told about this. Mikhailo Podolyak, Zelensky's communications advisor. He played on Trump's ego during the negotiations, a tactic that Axios described as a deliberate strategy of manipulating Trump through flattery, while simultaneously undermining his peace proposals publicly. In my opinion, they're just a bunch of street bullies, as it turned out, thieves. An explosion in the Oval Office. Trump won the election. On February 28, 2025, Zelensky came to the White House for what was supposed to be a historic moment. Restoring relations to normal, forget everything that happened before. A new page, a clean slate, as they say. We'll open the door again. We'll start everything over. We'll sign an agreement on mineral resources between Ukraine and the United States, and now we'll be family friends. Trump wanted a deal. American access to Ukraine's rare earth metals in exchange for continued support. And then one of the most extraordinary events in the history of the Oval Office happened. It was actually broadcast live. The whole world saw it. The world watched, and those who missed it quickly tuned in after hearing about it. Trump said to Zelensky, "You, in fact, are not showing any gratitude at all for American support." He accused him of disrespectful behavior, and he said, "You are playing with World War III." Vice President Vance increased the pressure, accusing Zelensky of conducting propaganda tours and directly campaigning for the Democrats in Pennsylvania. Zelensky had just arrived from there. Zelensky did not back down. He argued, he interrupted, he crossed his arms, he rolled his eyes. For Trump, it was another sign of disrespect, and the meeting ended abruptly. The minerals agreement was not signed. The White House reported that they asked Zelensky to leave. The scheduled press conference was canceled. Zelensky left the White House ahead of time. He refused to apologize. He went to Fox and said he had nothing to apologize for. That's his personal business. The deal was eventually signed 2 months later, in April 1925, but in a much reduced form, and without the inspiration or enthusiasm of the American side. American military aid was counted as investments in the Reconstruction Fund for Ukrainian natural resources. However, the damage to personal relationships happened a second time, actually the fourth time, but that's not important. Here comes a new wave again. Now everything will be different. The damage was done again. And I would say this time it's final. Corruption under Zelensky. And now let's go back to that phrase from 2020. Do you remember how Zelensky spoke about Amanpour? Please stop saying that Ukraine is a corrupt country, because from this moment on, that's not the case. He told Amanpour, but addressing Trump through Amanpour through the camera. Let's see what happened after these words. In January 2023, a massive procurement scandal broke out. The Ukrainian military was purchasing food at prices inflated 2 to 3 times above the market rate. Not procurement prices, but market prices. Deputy Minister of Defense Vyacheslav Shapovalov resigned. 5 regional governors were dismissed. Deputy head of the presidential office Kirilo Tymoshenko was removed. The Deputy Minister of Infrastructure was caught receiving a bribe of $400,000. All this happened while American taxpayers' money was flowing like a river, but that was just the beginning. In July 2025, Zelensky's party, Servant of the People, pushed through a law that stripped NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, and other anti-corruption agencies of their independence. They all became dependent on Zelensky. Think about it. The government tried to destroy the independence of the very agencies that investigate corruption. The question is, why? This caused the first mass protests in Ukraine. For the first time since Russia's full-scale invasion, thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets in the midst of the war to protest against their own government. They're being killed by Russian missiles every day, and yet they still came out. That shows just how bad things were. Under pressure, the parliament reversed its decision on July 31st, and then on November 10th, 2025, NABU revealed Operation Midas, which the Atlantic Council called the biggest corruption scandal. After 15 months of wiretapping and more than 70 searches, investigators uncovered a corruption scheme worth at least $110 million in Energoatom. This is the state nuclear energy company of Ukraine. This is what Zelensky was trying to stop. Contractors were forced to pay kickbacks of 10 to 15% on all contracts. The money was laundered through channels described by investigators as being connected to Russia. So, gentlemen, we're at war with Russia, and at the same time, Zelensky's people are laundering money with them, money that's being stolen from Americans. The scheme delayed critically important repairs to the energy infrastructure, waiting for bribes while Ukrainian civilians froze in the winter without electricity because of Russian strikes. Here's the most interesting part. The central figure in the scheme is Timur Mindich, a film producer and former business partner of Zelensky since the days of Kvartal 95, that very studio where Zelensky started his political career. Mindich has now fled to Israel. There were consequences. Justice Minister Herman Galushenko and Energy Minister Svetlana Hrinchuk were dismissed on November 19th. On November 28th, NABU conducted a search at the home of Andriy Yermak, the head of Zelensky's office and his closest associate. According to a law enforcement source, one of the luxury houses built with stolen money by Energoatom was intended for Yermak. Zelensky fired Yermak on the same day, but no one was arrested. Yermak's advisors, Podolyak and Leshchenko, were dismissed in December. The entire power structure that Zelensky built around Yermak collapsed. So what do we have? Zelensky's closest business partner was running a corruption scheme worth at least $110 million. His chief of staff may have received a luxury house from that money. His government tried to destroy the very agencies that investigate corruption. And all this was happening while American taxpayers were sending billions in aid to Ukraine. When Trump called Ukraine corrupt, Zelensky said, "That's no longer true, but the facts say the exact opposite." Trump was right, and Zelensky was lying. It's pretty hard to believe that he didn't know what was happening in his own government. Circus clown. After the incident in the Oval Office and the corruption scandals, Trump's rhetoric about Zelensky became increasingly personal and harsh. Trump called Zelensky the greatest salesman in the world, but added that he has no cards in his hand. He said that Biden was ripped off, that the U.S. spent $350 billion with no result. Trusov was walking at the beginning of 1926. Trump wrote that there is enormous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. And I have seen a lot of hatred in my life. He linked this mutual hatred to the fact that peace negotiations are stalling. So, March 1926. 3 rounds of negotiations between American, Ukrainian, and Russian officials in Switzerland and the Emirates did not lead to a breakthrough. Zelensky says that 90% of the framework agreement has been agreed upon, but the remaining 10%, territory and security guarantees, is the most difficult part. On March 14, Trump told NBC News, "I'm surprised that Zelensky doesn't want to make a deal. Tell Zelensky to make a deal because Putin is ready." He added that Putin is much easier to communicate with than Zelensky. When asked, "Is Ukraine helping the U.S. with drone technology against Iran?" Trump said directly, "No, we don't need help." He dismissed even the possibility of partnership. Meanwhile, the war with Iran shifted Trump's attention away from Ukraine. Now he's pressuring NATO allies with a new argument. "We helped you with Ukraine, now help us in the Strait of Hormuz." And Ukraine became a bargaining chip. What went wrong? Moving on. So, here's what I think. Zelensky fundamentally misunderstood Trump. Trump is not an ideologue. He's a deal maker. He operates on personal relationships, loyalty, and reciprocity. When Zelensky publicly corrected him, refused his requests, criticized him in The New Yorker, visited a swing state with Democrats, and then showed up in the Oval Office in a sweater to argue, he broke all the rules of Trump's world. Zelensky is a brave man. Yes, he stayed in Kiev when the Russians came. But courage in war and wisdom in diplomacy are two very different things, as they say in Odessa. You can't publicly insult the person who controls the supply of weapons for you. You can't campaign for his opponent. You can't lecture him about World War II. These are basic diplomatic mistakes. Well, I don't know, this is clear not only in diplomacy, but just in relationships with people, with others, it's clear too. From Donald Trump's point of view, his irritation is, well, obvious, as they say. It's plain as day. America has spent huge amounts. They spent it on Ukraine. The war is ongoing. No, it's absolutely unclear how it would be possible to win the way Volodymyr Zelensky wants to win. Volodymyr Zelensky keeps asking for more and more, without giving anything, as they say, tangible in return. Well, so to speak, the mineral deal eventually happened, but by that point, nobody needed it anymore. No intelligence cooperation, no gratitude, no compromise. Trump's instinct is transactional. What does America get? And Zelensky's answer, you are defending democracy and the international order. That's not the currency Trump trades in. That's for someone else. And when you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, insults, accusations of espionage against Krasnov, the visit to Scranton, the interview in the New Yorker, behavior in the Oval Office, corruption worth hundreds of millions, press censorship, the attempt to destroy anti-corruption agencies, a complete lack of gratitude, you start to understand why Trump is annoyed and why he says that it's easier with Putin. We live in a world where governments control trade, governments distribute aid, governments choose winners and losers. And in this world, personality means more than principles, and that's why we are where we are. Let me finish with this. Many of you care about what is happening in Ukraine. Some of you have family there. Some people left Russia because of what Russia has become, what it turned into. Some support Trump, some support Ukraine. Many support both and consider the conflict between them to be painful. Do you know why I'm telling you all this? It's not at all to blame anyone or, on the contrary, to exonerate anyone. I'm talking about this because it's important to look to the future, but first we need to understand how we got to where we are now, how it happened. The biggest mistake for Ukraine today is to keep doing what it's doing now, namely not making any decisions and just waiting for something. What are we waiting for after 4 years? Every day, every week brings new losses, new pain. We can argue endlessly, look for someone to blame, discuss other people's actions, or finally start making our own decisions. To be honest, yes, we weren't ready. Yes, we were hoping for luck, for someone to come and save us. But now we've grown up and we understand no one is coming. We are responsible for our own choices. Us, no one else. If Ukraine can grow up and realize that its future is only in its own hands, then the people will have a chance not just to survive, but to win and remain themselves. But for that, you need to overcome the little resentful child inside yourself who is always looking for someone to blame. No one is to blame. It's time to make decisions. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. Until we meet again.